discretion is advised.
What was your biggest fear when you were a child? Nuclear war. I'm old. Went through the hide under your desk drills. I had nightmares for ducking years about bombs dropping, and my family, especially my elder grandma, trying to escape, and my grandma trying to keep up and not being able to. Holy Christ, I was scared for years. The rapture. I was raised in a cult. I was terrified God would get my family and leave me. It sounds trifle, but it was a real ducking thing for me at the time. I was raised Christian, and as a 4-year-old, the thought of the rapture and of Jesus returning scared the shit out of me. I was sure he knew I didn't like church, and I'd be in big trouble for that, and for lying and saying I did like it. Same. It was a real thing for me. I still remember being 9 or 10 years old. I came downstairs and the house was empty, doors were open and there was this eerie silence. I was sure I was left behind and just broke down and had what I later learned was a full-on panic attack. Father kidnapping me and never seeing my mom or sister again. It was a serious enough threat that I had a police escort at school. This was in the mid-80s, when cops in a school were unheard of. Later on it changed to fearing my stepdad coming home drunk. Falling into a giant crevasse that could be hidden behind any rock or cleft in the snow. Always had to keep an eye out for those in the winter. The dark. Especially the basements when I was little, because I always imagined something evil in the darkness that would drag me away. Hides. This was compounded by the fact my restraint came loose on a theme park ride while it was stationary upside down. I still remember grabbing onto the girl's arm next to me in desperation until it spun back around again. Being abused by my family. Had to live that fear every day. Never knew what would set them off. Every time I heard one of them approaching I was terrified. Tried to escape several times, but just had to wait it out until I turned 18 and could leave legally. I don't remember much of it now, but my mom tells me I had an overwhelming fear of our house catching on fire when I was young. It got to the point where I had a little bag packed by my door of toys and such in case there was one. And I always told her never to say the F word around me. When I was 12 I was worried I had died suddenly. My real family was mourning me. Except as a survival mechanism my mind switched to an alternate universe where I didn't die, and a few random things shifted around, like Brunhoff always being the creator of the DIY forum thread on the RuneScape forums rather than Muffin Duff. I was afraid this would keep happening and eventually my aged body would still be functioning in an endless vacuum of an alternate universe, completely alone for all eternity. Until I was 9 I was dreadfully afraid of fire. I used to have nightmares of my house burning down, watching my parents burn to death, my school burning down, being trapped in a fire, and so much more. I'm a professional chef now, and I literally play with fire with no qualms at all. I was maybe 6 years old and watched the movie Stigmata. For many childhood years, I was afraid I would wake up with wounds on my hands or feet and would cry if I saw the movie cover. Abandonment. Never having a wife, mom being killed by my stepdad, my brothers getting taken away by social services. Not being allowed to see my dad anymore. 4 of these almost happened. Being permanently ditched someplace with people who didn't want me, I guess. I got left with a lot of random people as a kid and sometimes I wouldn't hear back from my mom for several months longer than planned. I knew she had it in her to get rid of a kid. If they misbehaved she put my older sister in a foster home, and that she didn't like me, so it freaked me out a bit when she'd leave me with a new stranger and vanish. My parents dying. In my first 5 years all my great grandparents, 2 of my grandparents and a host of great aunts and uncles died. I was convinced they were next. Allowing any of my limbs to hang over the edge of the bed, or taking that first leap off the bed so the monsters couldn't grab my legs. My parents getting murdered while I was away at boarding school. Don't know why on earth I thought my presence would have changed shit, but guess I just wanted to be there. Skeletons. The end scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where Donovan chooses the wrong cup and dies, combined with stumbling upon a lot of rotting animal carcasses out in the woods when I was a kid, pretty much scarred me. My parents disappearing on me somehow, and that I would have to take care of my younger brothers. Decided I was gonna go boxcar children style, forage food and wait for a rich grandpa to come save us. I didn't have a grandpa, never mind a rich one. I thought about this way too much. Tornadoes and thunderstorms. We moved to Texas and I never experienced such awful storms where I was from. It was a particularly bad first few years as well. I would sometimes throw up, I was so scared. Now I love rain and storms. I don't know. Human skeletons. Which is odd, since my dad was an archaeologist when I was very young, and I visited him on digs. But I suffered horribly from ear infections as a child, and on one occasion, my parents had rented a movie for me to watch while they were at work. I was probably 8 years old at the time. In the movie, a Santa in a train car turned into a greenish skeleton, and I was scared for a long time. A year or two later we visited a monastery in Jutland, where they have excavated skeletons of medieval monks and sort of just covered the graves with glass. I fell on one of those graves and was face to face with a skeleton. It took some a lot of years before I enjoyed museums after that. As a child, I was very scared by the Bigfoot video. It seems to be made in the USA. Was it in 1976, 1977? It seemed to me that he was standing in a dark corridor and waiting for me to go to my room. The thought of someone into my windows while was left alone when it was dark out. I got so scared at times and would crawl to each room. And tornadoes. The wind terrified me because I thought there would be a tornado coming and I didn't have a basement to save me. I lived in the upper part of Canada at the time. Fire. I had a nightmare once that I was standing outside my home, crying and watching it burn while everyone I loved was inside. Incredibly traumatic for a 7-year-old, even though it was just a dream. Kidnap. I used to carry a knife. It worked whenever they tried. I was like bitch and ran away like chicken. None kidnaps the kid that has a knife. A lot of kids and adults got kidnapped. They called it Sequestro Express. They just kidnap a target at random for a quick ransom or and a short shag. I'm 27 now, and I still feel uncomfortable without a knife. Getting used to though. It's a bit difficult to go around without a weapon. It's fucking weird. My parents getting divorced. There was never a real risk of it happening. It was just a fear of mine. Probably because of a big social push towards child mental health in divorced families and whatnot through school and cartoons, etc. I'm almost 39 and they are still together. My father going on one of his crazy, alcoholic fueled rampages. He would beat the living shit out of me and oftentimes kick me out of the house. No little kid should ever have to go through the drama and pain of trying to find a place to sleep on your own. It's something I will never forget. When I was a kid, it was a tradition to watch a kid-friendly horror movie after we went trick or treating on Halloween. One Halloween, me, my mom's BFF, my brother and me were about to watch the stop-motion movie Frankenweenie for the first time. But, as somebody with really bad anxiety, I couldn't take it. As soon as we got halfway through the movie, I was so scared I ran out of the living room and into my room where I locked my door. Now, I'm scarred from that movie. Even to this day, I get made teased for being scared of that movie. But, I don't care. I'm proud of that and that's all I care about. I have this broken thing on my bed and I always thought that if I stuck my head through it, it would regenerate and kill me by going through my head. Looking back on it, I was stupid. Boogeyman saw some shit TV show with my older brother that I shouldn't have when I was 7 and the fear lasted well into my early teens. Had a small flashlight which I kept to shine under the bed at times, just to be sure he wasn't there. That a volcano would blow up and kill me. A reasonable rear, you say? There are no volcanoes anywhere near my childhood home, like in my whole country. Fairies. I believe this started right around when Spidowik became a thing, and the idea of this mystical conundrum that there might really be these very earthly creatures amongst us freaked me out. This is also the reason why I stayed away from those batches of mushrooms you would ponder upon at a park or anywhere with vegetation, because apparently those were portals into different realms with these fairies. It seemed pretty sick to be in a completely different world with other beasts, although the catch was being an able return from the prior world you came from. I was a kid that was always worried about all sorts of stuff. From age 4-7 I was always staying with the lady and kids that lived across from us after school was done, until my mom was done working at 5 PM and she would come pick me up 10-15 minutes later. I was always worried that something would happen to both my mom and dad, and that I would have to live with the neighbors forever, because I didn't like it at all there. So whenever my mom wasn't there yet at 5:20 PM I was already starting to get worried. Apparently living with any other family member wasn't an option for 4-7-year-old me. I just didn't consider it for whatever reason. When I was 6 or 7, I was scared that I would break a promise and God would be mad at me. I'd heard that God hated oath breakers, and I knew that an oath was like a promise. So I couldn't understand why adults were always telling kids to promise things. That we were going to die every time my mom took a sip of her coffee when we were in the car. The 80s started bombarding the world with don't drink and drive commercials and ads everywhere, talking about how dangerous and deadly it was, and how you could crash and die and kill other people too. Thing is, they never specified it was alcohol, and I was 5 years old, so I didn't really know what alcohol was. So my 5-year-old brain just assumed drinking any kind of beverage while driving a car was an invitation for disaster. In the mornings mom would be driving me to school and I'd freak out if she took a sip of her coffee, yelling "Mom, don't drink and drive. I don't wanna die." I sneakily watched Scream from my room while my parents watched it in the living room. For years, I was terrified of being in an empty public restroom. Because what if a masked murderer was hiding in one of the stalls waiting for the perfect moment to stab me to death? I was real little, but I remember watching some show about a kid that got hit by a glass door and a shard of glass embedded into his heart. He barely survived, and it was pretty bloody. Well, I got it in my head that this was a thing that all kids had to go through. So for several months I was expecting at any point to be stabbed in the heart by a shard of glass. It was a mixture of fear and resignation at my fate. McCale Myers from Halloween. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, my older sister and my dad decided to watch the movie Halloween. Since it was the month of October and my sister was at the age where you gain full interest in horror movie, my dad thought I was sleeping, but I wasn't, and wanted to see the movie too. So I got up and watched the movie in sneaky mode behind the edge of a wall where I could see the TV. I got caught, but managed to convince my dad I was brave enough to watch. Turn out IFKG wasn't. I didn't watch it for too long as I remember. For a couple of years after that I was scared of dark and mostly being alone even in lightened places. If I would have been left in a quiet place alone without a strong distraction that would block my head of making some scenario, I would have freaked my goddamn life. Hopefully I got over it around the beginning of high school. My English is very numb and autocorrect to destroy all I try to write, so sorry for your brain and eyes. I kept having this dream as a child where my parents would leave me in the car to get gas, munches, etc. And as I waited in the car it would just begin to drive itself and kidnap me. Even now I'm scared that the car is gonna suddenly drive itself into wall while I wait in the passenger seat, sometimes laughing my freaking butt off. I was scared of the toilet flooding. I thought if the toilet flooded then it wouldn't stop and I'd drown. So I just never flush the toilet, which is nasty, I know. I had actual nightmares about the toilet. I also had a panic attack at school because I thought the toilet was flooding in the public bathroom, but it was just flushing like a normal toilet. Click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.